For all that the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor did to push the United States to join World War II as one united force, it also turned the tides of prejudice against Japanese Americans. Anti-Asian sentiment, which had risen since the exclusionary immigration laws of the late 1800s, reached a climax. Now, fighting a global war, America was wrestling with hatred and nativism at home, knowing only one loyalty: the Stars and Stripes. Like their countrymen, Japanese Americans celebrated the 4th of July, played baseball, and planned for their future. Yet, under the guise of military necessity, the government cruelly imprisoned those same loyal Japanese Americans. Despite these civil injustices, incarcerated Japanese American men held on to the belief that justice would prevail. These boys turned soldiers laid down their lives and built an America with more justice. Their selfless actions made them the most decorated unit in the history of the United States military, yet their heroism remains unsung. These soldiers, the Nisei soldiers, were crucial to the victory of America and its allies. The 442nd, the Regimental Combat Team, the Japanese American soldiers of World War II. Within hours of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the FBI would be banging on the doors of Japanese Americans. For all their essential Americanness, the traumatic events of that December brought back into focus something that Japanese Americans always knew: their place in American society remained tenuous. Between the 1880s and 1907, a wave of Japanese immigrants arrived in the United States. While some volunteered for military service before World War II, they were victimized by racism and discriminatory laws that had long excluded them from U.S. citizenship. Policies like the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 continued to damage relations between Asian Americans and their fellow citizens.
It legitimized this sense of discrimination. So in that respect, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 begins this process of official discrimination against people of Asian descent.
By the mid-1930s, diplomatic relations between the United States and Japan were boiling. In the summer of 1936, fearing a potential war between the two countries, President Franklin D. Roosevelt demonstrated anti-Japanese sentiments within the government, authoring a secret memorandum that addressed security threats in Hawaii. The memo declared every Japanese citizen or non-citizen on the island of Oahu who meets Japanese ships should be identified and placed in a concentration camp in the event of trouble. Seeds of injustice had been planted by none other than the American government. The onset of World War II and Japan's alliance with Germany and Italy intensified nativist and anti-Japanese sentiments in America. Then, on December 7, 1941, Japan bombed the American military base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
This surprise attack ended the debate over American intervention in both the Pacific and European theaters of World War II. Fearing the potential subversion of Japanese Americans, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, sealing his administration's prejudice into law. Citing the need to protect against espionage and sabotage to national defense, the executive order authorized the War Department to designate military areas from which any or all persons may be excluded. Using the order, the government forced over 120,000 ethnic Japanese, 2/3 of whom were citizens, to relocate to 10 West Coast prison camps. The same country that had so boldly professed liberty and justice for all had deprived the Japanese of life, liberty, and property without due process of law. The imprisonment turned the lives of the Japanese into a nightmare. They were given 1 week to pack and leave their homes, and over $400 million of property was lost. the Japanese place in society was effectively erased as they arrived at their desolate prisons. The betrayal of their own country stung like the desert winds. Surrounded by barbed wire and crammed into oppressive living quarters, it is hard to believe that these were American citizens.
The conditions were bad, but more than anything, it was like the country that they had been loyal to betrayed them.
Nevertheless, the Japanese Americans began to prove their loyalty. Activated in June 1942, the 100th Infantry Battalion, a segregated unit of Hawaiian Japanese Americans, fought well and took heavy casualties for America in Italy. Their valiant and heavily decorated service convinced the War Department to form a mainland Japanese American combat team so the imprisoned Nisei, who were second-generation Americans, could help defend the nation. Despite the War Department's good intentions, their attempts to recruit Nisei became yet another example of the government's ignorance. The Nisei, who were American citizens, were asked if they were willing to forswear any allegiance to the Japanese emperor, as if their home country had forgotten their citizenship entirely. After facing countless injustices, why would any Nisei join the war effort? Their imprisonment was the antithesis of all that America stood for. The Nisei could have easily turned their backs on their prejudiced nation. Yet, thousands still volunteered to prove their loyalty and never lost faith in the promise of America. These released Nisei united under one banner, that of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team.
When I went to sign up, they asked the question, will you fight for the country, United States? Yes, I do. Will you fight for Japan? No, I won't.
The motto of these Nisei soldiers was go for broke, risk anything to succeed. They began proving their heroism quickly. In the Vosges Mountains of France, the Texan 1st Battalion of the 141st Regiment became trapped by Nazi forces. Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler himself ordered that regardless of the cost, the 275 men, known as the Lost Battalion, were not to be rescued. At this pivotal moment, the Nisei soldiers of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team pushed through treacherous terrain towards their comrades. They suffered heavy casualties to win the battle, but saved over 200 lives. Months later, the 442nd was again given a seemingly impossible task. The Gothic Line, the last line of Nazi defense in Italy, had held against Allied attacks for 5 months. In order to break the line, the Nisei scaled Mount Folgorito overnight, 3,000 feet of sheer cliff. To protect their comrades, those who fell did so silently. It took the 442nd only 32 minutes to shatter the stronghold, pushing the fight into the German mainland and marking a turning point in the war. However, even as the Nisei accomplished these feats, the ultimate crime against humanity was taking place: the Holocaust. Under Adolf Hitler's orders, European Jewry was forced into concentration camps, sites of mass murder and horrific suffering. As the 522nd Field Artillery Battalion of the 442nd marched through Germany, they liberated a labor subcamp of Dachau. The plight of the Jews struck a chord with the experiences of the Nisei in America's prison camps. Fear and prejudice were the common threads in both stories. Days later, the 522nd discovered the survivors of the Dachau Death March. According to technician Ichiro Imamura, they were like skeletons, all skin and bones. The Nisei pulled them from the snow, saving their lives and rewriting hundreds of stories.
We saw after a couple of hours when they got up in the morning, different faces, we didn't know who are they actually. In the beginning, we thought that those are Russians. It took some time to realize those are real Americans, and they took care of us. They saved our lives.
When the soldiers returned to America, the valiant actions of the 442nd were recognized in front of the nation by President Harry Truman.
You fought not only the enemy, but you fought prejudice, and you won.
442nd veterans, Senator Daniel Inouye and Senator Spark Matsunaga, prompted the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, otherwise known as House Resolution 442, named to honor the unsung 442nd. The act recognized the fundamental injustice of the evacuation, relocation, and internment of United States citizens during World War II, providing a full federal apology and redress. The Nisei had finally brought justice to their story. In an America gripped by racism, wartime hysteria, and failed political leadership, it had seemed that nothing could rewrite the American people's misguided fears. After years of discrimination, the American government imprisoned its own citizens. Despite this, thousands of ordinary individuals led the way to an America with more justice. Though they could have easily turned their backs on the country that imprisoned them, the Japanese Americans of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team left no doubt of their valor and courage. They saved thousands of lives and changed history.
Oftentimes I say there are two Americas, and one has less justice in it, and we happen to live in the one that had less justice. And to come out of that America and fight for the other America is really phenomenal.
The willingness to risk anything and everything for a more perfect union is a truly extraordinary value. This is the creed of a true American. This was the creed of the Nisei soldier.